Today we're going to be talking, and let me turn my camera on. We're going to be talking about preparing for the PMP exam. This is a rigorous exam, and it's going to be challenging us in many ways. It's not a normal exam like you'd think. Usually exam challenges your knowledge, right? Well, this exam actually challenges your behavior as a project manager. So you're going to have to prepare for it in a little different manner than you prepare normally for projects. We're going to be looking at just that. By the way, if you haven't met me before, my name is Tim Jerome. I manage projects. I've been doing it since the early 1990s. I have degrees, undergraduate and graduate in business. I have been an IT director. I've been a project manager. I've been a consulting project manager, and that's where I got my international experience. On top of that, I've been teaching people like you for, let's see here, 2004, since over 15 years, 16 years, yeah. I've been pretty busy, I guess. So I am an expert. In fact, beyond just business school, I've had extended training on a lot of these topics that we discuss. So I'm a good person to ask questions of if you have any. Today, we're going to talk about how you prepare for the PMP exam. A lot of questions I get from people are like, what materials should I use? When should I schedule it? When I'm getting a 70% score? Or should I just go through 3 or 4 practice exams that have 200 questions each? And is that enough? Actually, I've been listening to you guys, and I've taught between 6,000 and 7,000 people. And so I've captured the best of their recommendations, and I took what seemed to be best, and then I used that over the last 3 or 4 years, and I've been applying it in my classes, and I found out that there's a set group of things that we're going to do. First of all, we want to get our morals and ethics straight, and then we want to go through the steps. We learn, we practice, and we train, okay? Very fundamental. You won't believe how fundamental it is. It's funny because these items that we think are so monumental, they're simple. They really are. The problem is they're simple in concept, but like many other things, it takes a little bit of dedication to promote. Let's see here. Oh, we already have a question. I want to learn the PMP, but will it help me be a better product manager? Okay, Sheila, real quickly. Yes, project management is not just project management. It's general business management. It's management based on business good practice. And so it gives you a group of skills. Now, it gives you these management and leadership skills within the context of a project. And a project is nothing more than work that's unique, never been done before, and also has a specific start or end. So it has even more constraints than regular work is. So yeah, it will help. And actually, we all agree that projects, if you're doing projects, you may not be called a project manager. You may just be doing this work in line with your other organizational work. And so the skills and knowledge that you attain in managing projects just roll out into this. Now, we're going to be learning these skills and this knowledge. We're going to be practicing it, and we're going to be training it. We need to understand what those mean. And then we're going to put this all together, and we're going to look at some actionable activities. But first of all, why? Why do we study this? First of all, when you look at the Project Management Institute, who owns the PMP exam and also owns the questions and the procedure for taking the exam, have a very, very specific focus on planning. If you plan well, it makes things easier and better. Investing in planning provides a better result. Okay, that makes sense, right? First of all, in planning, if you put more effort in planning, and if you have a change, wouldn't it be nice to change the plan instead of plan or make a change right at the end of a project? Yeah, it's easier to change things if you have the plan in place. Now, second of all, it costs less. It really does. It costs less to change a plan than it does when you're halfway through creating a product. So it's better to invest in planning than to invest in changing the product. It's cheaper, it's quicker, and it's easier. Now, not only that, but if we have plan in place, we can have some expectations. We have some forecasts and estimates. And with those forecasts and estimates, we can do some interesting things. We can create what's called a benchmark or a baseline. And then as we go through the work, we can track against it, right? And that gives us variances or differences. That allows me to track progress. And I can ask myself, am I going faster than I expected? Am I going slower than I expected? Am I missing something? Or am I learning something new? And that's what helps us. Now, so in two ways, planning allows us to do better. Number one, it actually moves change to the beginning of the project where it's cheaper and easier. Number two, it allows for continuous improvement through the analysis of the data that we're establishing. To get back to your question, Sheila, this makes sense for being a project manager, because whether you're on a project or you're in an operational activity, and that's repeating work compared to a project's unique work, this planning actually gives you great benefit either way, right? You can track your progress and tell how you're going and make improvements, or you can also invest in planning. And we want to do both, right? Well, that's project management, and that's good practice for project management. And when I say good practice, I mean it makes things better, right? It makes things better and easier, and it keeps the work from failing. It helps for business too. There's good ways to manage business. First of all, less waste of resources and time, right? Again, if you forgo a plan, you're going to be fumbling around a little bit and you won't know what to do. If you get the planning out of the way first, sure, it's going to be slow going initially, but you know what? Once you have that plan in place, you're going to progress fairly efficiently. Second of all, you don't have to back things out and fix things, right? Rework. A rework is where you have to have a mistake. You have to stop, undo what you did, and do it right. Okay, that's a waste of time and resources, and it can be a waste of raw materials, what we call scrap. And so we, in business, we like this whole idea of good practice and following these behaviors. There's also something called reuse of historical success. It's called lessons learned, right? You learn something early on and it makes your work good. Well, if you do that over time, you create what's called a knowledge base. And this knowledge base assists you in faster and more efficient planning. Yeah, I have a lot of lessons learned and good practice, and it's going to make my planning even better. And in business, there's one goal, right? What's our goal in business? To make more money. We call that revenue, but it's not just revenue. We like the part of revenue that's called profit. Business is always an investment and it's always a risk. And you always repay that investment first, and then it's profitability. Now, if you're investing in planning, if you're tracking in progress, and you're continually improving, and you're not wasting resources and time, and you're reusing historical success, guess what? All of those together means that you're paying off your investment instead of waste, instead of reuse, more profitability. So to close that out, Sheila, yeah, what we learn as a project manager are the same good practice that you can apply as being a business manager. And that's why. Now let's get into this whole idea of good practice, okay? It has to do with morals and ethics, with what is wrong or right. So let's talk about this. I'm very famous for talking about it in the context of a hammer. A hammer has a right use and a wrong use, right? It can put nails into wood and it can break windows. Now, a hammer is designed to put nails into wood. That's its right use. That's good practice for that hammer. Breaking windows, it can do it, but it's not good practice. It's not right. Guess what? People have a design. No matter what you believe or where you believe we came from, there is a right behavior for people and there's a wrong behavior for people. People can do both things. They have a purpose. We all have a single purpose. We are made for something, hammering nails. But until we find that purpose, we don't know whether we should break windows or hammer nails. Once we find that we are good at hammering nails, and that's the right thing for us to do, all of a sudden things get very clear. Number one, we know what we're supposed to do and we're going to do it right. And if that's what we're made to do, it's going to be easy for us. And if it's easy for us, it's going to be fun. That's called motivation. Motivation is giving people a reason to do work well. It's connecting it to fulfillment of their personal needs. And one of our personal needs is just that. Finding right and wrong and finding fulfillment in our work. Now, if we understand this, we can actually use the background of organizational behavior and the study of the human individual and humans in groups that went off through the 20th century. We have Maslow, right? What did Maslow understood? He understood that we acquire certain needs and we're primarily driven through those needs. If you attend the PMP class, you learn we start off as very young and we have a need to maintain our bodily functions, right? We need food, we need sleep, we need other things. As we grow, we need safety. Safety is regularity. It's feeling comfortable and relaxed. And then we need to be around people like us. We have social needs. And then we have what? We need acclaim. Some of us do. Some of us never need that. But many of us do. What we're saying here is if I understand my personal needs, I can use them to actually connect to my work. And all of a sudden, the work I'm doing is meeting my personal needs. And therefore, I feel more safe. My body is taken care of. My social community is taken care of. And I have more fulfillment through my work. It's no longer something I do in spite of everything else. Herzberg is a lot more simple than this, okay? Herzberg says it's all about hygiene and motivation. Most people come to work for hygiene reasons, right? Which means they come to work, they clock in, they leave, and they do it to make money. That's all. It's very simple. If you want people to come to work, You apply things like safety in the office, a reasonably clean place, a reasonably controlled environment, right? And that's all. If you want to motivate, you're going to have to add to that. Ouchi says, connecting to something bigger than who you are is part of what makes a human being. It's a right behavior. It's part of what's wrong or right. It's right for human beings to connect to social movements and to societal movements and to religious and spiritual movements and business movements. That's how we are made. That's what makes us so successful on this planet. We tend to go into groups belonging to something bigger than who we are. Now, Maslow calls this self-actualization. Self-actualization, Maslow says, connecting us to our single purpose for existing, right? They're very similar. If we understand this, then we can start looking at how to prepare for the exam. If you want to prepare for the exam, connect it to something, right? Connect it to something that's bigger than who you are. You want to do something really big for the world, or you want to do something for your family, or you want to gain respect. Doesn't matter what the motivation is. All you have to do is articulate it to yourself. And then that's your primary motivator. Fulfillment of that need is going to motivate you almost more than anything else. There's also a right way and a wrong way to learn. We are creatures that are built around the way our minds and our bodies function. We can't get away from that. And it seems that we learn in a certain way. There's a right way that we learn, and there's a wrong way. Preparing for the exam is not just memorization. And this is something I talk about a lot. Memorization can happen in many ways too. It's not just sitting down, looking at a page and trying to remember it as a photographic image. There's actually a lot better ways to memorize. And that's only part of the preparation for the exam and learning. There's three parts. We've known this in Western civilization for almost 4,000 years. We've been studying this. Philosophers and great teachers have been studying, how do I learn? How do I acquire knowledge and wisdom? And it's come down to three steps. Number one, we study, we learn, we're exposed to knowledge for the first time. You are not expected in this part, which we'll call phase one, to memorize. It's too short a time. Memorization does not occur when you first open the book and read a page. It doesn't. You open a book, read a page, you close it. You come back to that page, read it again, and think about it, and write it down, and close it. You open it up, you read it again, and you ask questions. I don't understand this part. And so what do? You go off and study a piece of it. This is what studying and learning is all about. It's going back to a topic in a repetitious manner. Okay? Now, that just gets you introduced to the material. Then there's a phase called practice. This is the repeated success over and over and over again. This is where you're going to make mistakes and you're going to be frustrated. You're going to be continuously hitting the wall of what you don't know. And a lot of people are frustrated there. That's all right, because this frustration points to you where you should be studying next. Frustration and making mistakes and getting questions wrong can be beneficial if you stop after you've done with the exam, the practice exam, You list out all the questions you got wrong. You go back and do your research, and you capture those gaps in your knowledge. Then you're going to have to do some deeper review, right? This is where we are, phase 2. And then you're going to clarify that doubt, whether you go to material or the YouTube or even a person who's wiser than you, right? An expert. And they clarify it with you. And they don't just teach you what the answer is. They teach you procedures for getting that answer and many similar answers together. So working with a human being is sometimes better than just working with a book that can't interact with you, with humans are. So this practice actually works really well when you have a mentor. That's what you're going to do. And we're going to explore this in just a few minutes. We're going to look at what this looks like when we go into preparing for the PMP exam. I'm just laying this out right now. There's another step. It's called training. Once you've acquired the knowledge, you're going to continue to refine. You know those people who've been doing their job for 25 or 30 years? They're not just experts, they're masters. If you do something for 20 years, you're going to know everything. If you're an archer, if you shoot 100 arrows a day for 20 years, you're going to know things nobody else does. You're going to observe patterns, patterns that change over weeks, patterns that change over months, patterns that change over years. And we're going to look at that, and you're going to say, I wonder why that happens. I wonder why I made that mistake today and not 2 weeks ago. And you're going to start looking at another level of detail, a very refined level of detail. And that's what we call training. Once you, and again, you can see how this fits together. If you look at this, studying and learning is opening the books first time and going through all the content, right? It's your preparation. Phase 2 is going through a lot of practice questions and attaining the knowledge and understanding of the behavior. So when you go into the exam, you pass it. And then once you pass the exam, you're going to continue to train. Let's look at this in another detail, okay? Like we said, phase 1, or learning, is an initial introduction, right? A lot of people don't have formal training in management, leadership, or the technical parts of project management, right? They've just been thrust into the position. You know, they accidentally stepped into being a project manager because they were in the moment and their director says, here you go, here's some work, tell me how you're doing in a day. Now, the problem is you don't know what you don't know, and you don't have anybody there who can actually lead and direct you. So what this does is phase 1 gives you a foundation. It builds out all of this knowledge that you have not figured out for yourself. And it confirms or it rejects what you've learned up to now. It reestablishes a foundation of how to do the work right. At this point, a lot of people ask, what should I prepare? How should I prepare? What type of material should I prepare? And the best guidance I can give you is that PMI recommends 3 PMI docs. Now, you can prepare going to a company like Hygiene, and we can work with you, and we have all the content there, but we're still going to say these are documents. These are source documents, like the project management body of knowledge, the exam content outline, the code of ethics. All of these documents PMI has built to help you understand good practice in project management. We have another question from Prakash. I plan to take the exam in December. How shall I map tasks given in the exam content outline to read and prepare from the PMBOK? Ah, good for you, Prakash. Okay, this is going to be a little technical for many of you, but this is a great topic. And I'm glad that you're actually using the exam content outline. For those of you who may have not been exposed to this document, it's the tasks a project manager generally performs throughout the life of the project. Now, what does that mean for the PMBOK, the project management body of knowledge? Well, the project management body of knowledge actually says what? It says these are the processes that we apply to get work done. So on one side, you have the tasks a project manager perform, and you have the processes over there. So if you think about this, the exam content outline is the hand, and the project management body of knowledge, or the PMBOK, is the glove. And working together, the project manager using their tasks, the exam content outline, and the project management body of knowledge, the processes, that's how they control the project. Okay, now, how do I map the tasks in the exam content outline to the project management body of knowledge? Again, Prakash, we're going to get highly technical here. From the 49 processes, you understand the inputs and outputs to these processes are project documents. Each one of the tasks may be assigned a knowledge area, and they're definitely assigned a process group, but they mention documents. And if you can see those documents and whether that task is updating a document, which means that document is an input to that task, or that task is handing a document over, that's an output. You can see how you can start mapping inputs and outputs to the inputs and outputs processes and selecting the best process based on the specific project documents that are being used. It takes a little bit of time, but you can actually do this. And remember, processes are the glove. They are nouns. Tasks are verbs. And so you're going to have to figure out how the verbs and the nouns both work together to get the work done. This is a worthy task. You may not get it complete before the end and before your exam, but this will give you a great, deep, and rich understanding of both the processes a project manager uses and the tasks they perform. Good for you. Great question. So we've actually touched on the 3 documents in the phase 1 section that we were talking about by explaining with Prakash, right? What did we talk about? We talked about the project management body of knowledge, that's the glove, the exam content outline, that's the hand, and we've been talking about the code of ethics, what's right or wrong all along. That's why PMI says these are really good documents to rely on. Let's assume that you completed your preparation. You've gone through all of the material. You understand everything from integration management to stakeholder management. You understand everything from initiating process groups to closing process groups. You cover the material. Now, various parts of the material are going to be very clear to you because of your experience. Other parts are going to be about a little cloudy. However, you want to actually start switching from a daily review to primarily looking at practice questions. Sit down as if you're in the real exam. Now, when you're in the real exam, you're going to be in a test center. It's going to be local to your city, and you're going to be isolated from everything. You won't even have any of your materials in your pockets. They'll be in a lockable cabinet while you're in a cubicle in the test area in the test center. They're going to give you paper, pencil, and a standard calculator. That means one memory register and about 6 functions on that calculator. So when you practice, you want to replicate that experience. You don't want to be shocked when you sit down to your test. You want to be comfortable. You want to have confidence, and that's what confidence is. I've practiced something enough times, so when I do it for real, it's just like another practice session. Confidence is not feeling good about yourself. It's actually repeating what you're doing so many times. It's automatic and natural. You're going to get questions wrong. That's good, because questions wrong say, this is where I need to study next. You don't have to study the whole PMBOK again. You've gone through everything. And this will give you an opportunity to focus and deep dive into the topics you need. Now, that's good for the PMBOK. It's great for the exam content outline. It's good for the code of ethics. What really helps is if you have somebody who's been studying this for a couple decades. This is something that's been known well throughout the last decade and a half, and you can find it out on the internet. It seems that if you're in a study group, the chances of you passing the first time is about 75 to 80%. And that's not bad. For this rigorous of an exam, that's pretty good. If you have an expert-led class, you're up to 95 and 97%, especially if you can come back and interact with them on a regular basis. Wouldn't it be nice to have your personal mentor so you can, like, 2 or 3 times a week go through and review the things you're getting wrong and have them clarify doubt? Somebody who's been doing this for a while and doesn't just know the material that well, but they know how to explain it well. That's the type of mentor and expert you need. Now, what's nice is that you're identifying your weaknesses and clarifying doubt, but we already said that. We can monitor progress. Okay, that's the right thing to do, right? You're collecting data along the way, but you're not just saying, I got 20%, I got 30%, I got 40%, I got 50%. You're also looking at, well, it took me 2 days to go from 20 to 30%. It took me 3 days to go from 30 to 50%. It took me 4 days to go to 60%. And all of a sudden, you start seeing changes in the data. And that gets really interesting. And with the change in data, you can start looking at forecasting. And you can say, is it reasonable for me to expect to take the exam in 2 weeks based on my progress to date? We're talking about managing the PMP preparation that you're going through like a project. You're using data not to make the decisions, but to make better decisions. It's supporting your decision making. And that's what I would recommend. Track about 3 or 4 days of progress using this method. See if this method is good for you. See if it works for you. See if it assists you in gaining a higher score quicker. Not just a higher score, but the rate at which you gain a higher score. Is it acceptable, and is it working better than what you're doing now? You're going to want to have random questions when you go through phase 2. That's a key. For all of this to work, make sure that the pool of questions you're pulling from, whether it's a book, the internet, or other sources, make sure that your practice questions are random. That way, if you do forget something, let's say you forget a topic between today and tomorrow, you might get it right today, but if you forget it, you get it wrong tomorrow. And getting it wrong tomorrow says, hey, I have to review that. And so with random questions, you're continually picking up the things you're forgetting as you're preparing. Phase 3 is after you get your PMP. We continue to prove, and we learn variations in innovation. We find better ways of doing things. We find different ways, different alternatives of doing things. And we actually become very expert in a broad range of tools, not just one tool. And this is where we start continuing to listen, not just to the leaders and experts. We're now an expert. As a PMP, PMI is saying, hey, world, listen to this person. They're a project manager. They're an expert, and they've demonstrated to us, and we stand behind them. We listen and we lead, but we learn from the people who are following us. They are our greatest teachers. The students that you have, the mentees that you collect through your professional career are the best students that you can find. You'll find the greatest leaders are the ones who listen more. Now, this refinement is rewarded by PMI. This is how you retain your PMP credential. Every 3 years, you have to earn what, 60 hours if you don't want to take the exam, and then you get credit for those before your PMP expires, and then it picks up. Most of this learning and refinement and picking up these credits are professional development, leadership, understanding of business, project management. It's also publicly speaking on these topics. It's also writing white papers and doing blogs and working with people, being a mentor, right? You get credit for these type of things. So PMI rewards you for phase 3 activities, and you reward yourself, right? You're continuing to grow. You're becoming that 20-year expert. So you see how phase 1, 2, and 3 that we've been using forever in society seems to map really well to a good preparation method, right? Morals and ethics, what's right or wrong. It seems we have what's a right way to prepare. Now, I don't have to actually prove this to myself. I've seen this, and I've read enough history and philosophy that says there's a lot of people much smarter than me that also said this is a good way of doing things. Try it out for yourself. Like I said, see if it works. You'll be surprised. Okay, now let's boil this all down, and we'll boil this down in about 10 or 15 minutes, okay? Phase 1, it'll take you about 32 to 36 hours to go through the material, whether you're picking up a book from a bookstore, whether you're sitting down in a workshop, whether you're sitting down at lunchtime with a group of peers. It takes about 30 to 35 hours to go through all the material. Don't expect to get great scores on the initial quizzes and practice, okay? Everybody going through the material the first time seems to get a score somewhere between 40 to 70%. That seems a little bit low, but that's pretty good, assuming that most of these people have never taken any formal project management training. That's a benchmark, okay? That's something to keep in the back of your mind. And don't try to memorize perfectly as you're going through this first review process. Go through it though, and go through everything. Do start looking for high-level patterns. And you're going to see some patterns. Some of the patterns that we expose in the classes are really simple, right? The project manager owns tying things together. The sponsor has the authority to close the project. And you see these patterns showing up over and over again. When you see patterns like that, especially in phase 1, write it down. and capture it, because those are the concepts, especially the early ones you observe, that are going to help you a lot when you go in and start answering practice questions and go into your exam. Phase 2 will take you about 5 to 8 weeks, and I'm talking about daily effort. Okay, sit down every day, just like you're brushing your teeth or doing exercises, for about an hour. Review 20 to 50 practice questions that are random, and sit as if it's in the real exam. You're isolated with only paper, pencil, and a calculator. Solve the problems, okay? Score and analyze. And early in this phase 2, don't even worry about the timing. Time management is critical for the exam, which means you're going to have a sense of urgency throughout the whole exam. You have 4 hours, 200 questions, and that boils down to about 1.2 minutes per question. So don't worry about that when you first get into phase 2. As your score gets higher and higher, you can start building it in. But primarily, you should be looking at, am I getting these things wrong or right? Then, once you start getting them more and more and more right, you can start working on time management and towards that target of 1.2 minutes per question. Review the questions and clarify doubts of the questions you got wrong. Go deep into the project management body of knowledge. Reach out to forums and communities. Talk, ask questions, ask clarification, and debate. Some of these questions get pretty tricky. They're not hard, but they are tricky. And the trickiness seems to follow certain patterns. If you start seeing patterns in the trickiness, copy that too. That's going to help you. This is going to help you on your test taking strategy. On some questions, you obviously see that 2 answers are correct and the other are 2 wrong. This is a pattern we call 50-50. On other questions, you see 4 options and there's a pattern, right? One of these things is not like the other. That helps you answer the question. Why would they have that on this question? All of these things are little hints to help you solve that problem. Not just your knowledge about project management, but your knowledge in solving problems, because that's what a project manager does. They don't have enough time. They don't have all the options they want, but they have to choose one. And that's what the exam puts you through 200 times every minute, every 1.2 minutes for 4 hours. Use experts and find them where you can. And when you do have an expert who's willing to work with you, please take advantage of that knowledge. They're happy to share. And if they are a PMP, they're obligated to share, right? They took a code of ethics to promote project management and to continue to improve. And you working with them helps them to meet those 2 obligations. Number 3, once you have your PMP, become a mentor. You may not feel like you're an expert. You are. According to the rest of the world, you certainly are. And according to your knowledge and behavior, you can say you really are. Oh, we have another question. Do I see the plan change in the exam pattern in June 2020 will have influence on the number of questions in Agile? Yes. Actually, you know what? Let's step out of the presentation. I want to show you something. Remember we were talking about the exam content outline? Let's go to the PMI webpage. Okay, this is owned and managed by Project Management Institute. And for those of you who are preparing for the exam, it should be very familiar because this is where you apply to take the exam. If you go under certifications and go under the PMP certification, This is where you're going to submit your application. Now, there's 2 documents here, and you can see them pretty easily. Let me see if I can get my pen to work here real well. Let's do it this one today. Okay, here's the current exam content outline right now. There's a new one here. Now, you'll notice here it says the exam is changing in 2020. In fact, July 1 is when the exam changes. If you look into these documents, it's going to tell you exactly what the changes are. First of all, let's see how things are organized. If you go to the first of the exam content outline, it actually shows a breakdown of the organization of the questions. There are 5 domains the exam content outline looks at. Looks at initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing, right? They call them domains here. They're not called domains in the PMP, but that's what they're called here. This says on the PMP exam, you can expect about 31 questions. That's a third of the exam will be on leading and directing the project. About 25% of the questions that you take, even though the questions are random, are going to be on planning and on monitoring controlling. And 10% of the questions are going to be initiating, and 10% are going to be closing. So that's basically how the questions are broken up. Even though the exam is totally random, they've had that randomness follow this pattern. Okay, this is what's changing. And this changes in June, and the first exams that are going to take advantage of this change will be July 1st. Let's look at the new exam content outline. This should create a bunch more questions, not just answers. This exam content outline says when July 1st comes around, half the questions are going to be on process. Now, what do I mean by process? I mean approving change, communicating with stakeholders. It's everything in the PMBOK, right? It's the technical part of project management that a project manager does. Analyze the budget, monitor risk, observe quality, ensure things occur, right? That's what we call process. Half the questions are going to be there. We don't have initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling anymore. But along with this process, we have 42% of the questions that are going to be on people, which is leadership. How do I lead people versus how do I manage people? What does leadership mean? What are the leadership activities I need to do? And it's not a definition exam. It's more of what do you do now? It's more situational, right? You have a conflict, you have some issues going on, what do? You know, you manage the conflict and you resolve the issues, right? Those are the type of things you're going to have to look at. This is what you're going to prepare for. It's not just initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. All those 5 process groups are still here. All those questions that we have today are going to be half the exam. But 40% or 2/5 of the question now are going to be on leadership itself. And Up to 10% of the questions are going to be in the business environment, right? Business decision making. How do decisions made inside of a business? How do you work within an organization to get things done? What is process and procedure? What is culture? What is power and politics, and how do you use that? Okay, that's the business environment. And the business environment gives a lot of context. That's not all. Right here, and you can see this right here, we say about half or 50% of the examination will represent predictive or agile approaches, and the other half will be, half will be predictive, which is plan driven, and half will be agile or hybrid. So half of these things will be agile, and the half of these will be predictive. Leadership under predictive, process under predictive, business environment under agile, right? This is the way we're going to approach that. This is the impact of agile. And so we're going to have to discuss, how does agile change project management? Now, lucky for you guys, we already had that talk, and we're up on YouTube right now. You can go to the Ijona webinars page, and you can see the link to past presentations. It's a really good opportunity for us to review that. But yeah, we're already talking about this in our classes, and we have been ever since the 6th edition of the PMBOK come out. Now the exam is starting to get caught up with us. That's the background, okay? That's what we're talking about with the number of questions asked. It's not just the number of questions per group is being asked, it's a whole paradigm shift. You know, we're looking at them in different ways. We're looking at the topics and the tasks a person performs as a project manager and all these things. It's a different world. Now, we have about 5 minutes. So let's go through our last phase here, okay? Once you have your PMP, you're going to be working together and refreshing your knowledge every 3 years. Be a mentor, demonstrate what you're refining, host webinars yourself, speak at conferences, write books, write papers, think big. If you're not thinking big, you're not yet there. I mean, think big. You have skills that you're learning right now if you're preparing for your PMP exam that is preparing you for big work. So if you want to do something big after you have your PMP, this is where you should do it. Demonstrate, publicly demonstrate that you're refining things. This is what I'm sorry, Covey, the 7 habits of highly effective people. This is what Covey calls sharpening your saw for the rest of your professional career. Do it. Continue to improve. Don't worry about competition. You know, worry about what you did yesterday and just fixing a little thing every day. A long journey, big journeys. Take one step, and one step. And that's all you're asking yourself to do. What's the step I need to take today? And lift up the people who are following you. When people want to be your mentee, embrace them, because if you help them grow, they're not going to replace you. You know what happens when you train people? They push you up. They force you to be better, but by moving up themselves, they move you up with them. We get this all wrong, and it's been there all along. All of this knowledge has been there. It's just waiting for you. It's waiting for you to actually build into the way you prepare for the exam. It's also waiting for you to use in business and your personal and professional development. Please take advantage of this. If you can, we would love to have you in our classes. We talk about this and much more. If you just stay in touch with us, please do. We love your questions. They really inspire us. And people who spend the time putting together a question are the people who are going to change the world. I really do appreciate the comments and questions you have. This is why I've been doing this for so long. Project managers are brilliant. We fell into this work accidentally, but we made a success of it anyway, and I will do what I can to help you grow and develop. Now, we don't have time to talk about the Feynman technique, which allows you to clarify doubt personally. We don't have time for Deming-Short cycle, which is a cycle of continuous improvement. But if you want to talk about that, please ask and we can clarify here. We can extend the session, but we don't have to. Okay, that is our discussion for today. Do we have any other questions? Okay. Good timing. Thank you for those brilliant questions, by the way. That was wonderful. I appreciate it. And also, thank you for allowing me to do this research. I want to thank again Ijonah Academy. We have more webinars and more activity. We have a class coming up on the 21st. If you're interested, would love to have you there. I've cited some documents that I've used in research of what we're talking about, and I think you could find other documents that support this as well. But if you go to these books, they talk about the same thing I was talking about today. I didn't make any of this up. This is something that's been going on since, Greek, ancient Greek times, through Romans, through Western civilization. Okay. I want to thank you guys for participating. I want to thank you all for being here today and setting aside time. And please stay in touch. We're there over at Ijonah. And if you have more questions, you can go over to the Ijonah Academy website and send in the question, or you can review the YouTubes and continue to watching us. Thanks again. We'll be promoting this material, but we'll also be having new material from a regular basis. So don't forget to come back on a regular basis. Thanks, guys.